CRM trends, data privacy, consulting masterminds, and AI versus ERP. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 216 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 216. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And this is the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformations, ERP projects, AI projects, whatever technology initiative you might be going through. This is a tech agnostic and independent and objective view of what you need to know. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. Be sure to subscribe or listen wherever you listen to or watch podcasts. Joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've got a fun episode today, as always. We're going to start off with some social media questions that we've received from the audience. We're going to get into some newsworthy topics. One is around CRM trends that we're seeing in the market. We'll talk about data privacy and some new emerging news there. And then later in the show, we're going to have a handful of guests, actually 4 guests from the Third Stage Consulting team. We're going to have our director of AI and data strategy. We'll have our senior director on. We'll have our chief strategy officer, and we'll also have our executive vice president of the EMEA region. All of them are going to be in a panel discussion with me in sort of a mastermind format where we're going to talk about digital transformation best practices. So be sure to stick around for that. And it's also a sort of a soft launch of our executive mastermind course that we're launching. It's a hybrid course that's partially online if you'd like to join online, or there's some in-person aspects to it as well that we'll also stream online. And we'll be doing those in-person events in London and Dubai later this year. But regardless of where in the world you are, you could join that remotely. And that's something that's going to be a very small, exclusive group. There's no cost to it, or there's no cost to join it, but it is something that we're limiting to a small group just so we can make it more of a mastermind peer sort of learning experience for people that are going through digital transformations or leading digital transformation. So be sure to stick around for that group that will give you sort of a preview of the type of minds that'll be part of that executive mastermind as it's being launched right now. And then finally, last but not least, actually one of the panelists, Khalid Morris, who is our director of AI and data strategy, he's going to join later in the show after the panel discussion. He and I are going to talk about AI versus ERP and sort of how those two worlds collide and intersect and where they're different and where they should be different. So we'll kind of unpack that whole concept of AI and how it ties to ERP and how they all come together into your digital transformation. So be sure to stick around for that. But before we jump into all that good stuff we've got coming up here today, Darian, what are some of the social media questions we've received recently?
Yeah, we have some interesting comments here. So this first one was on the video that you recently posted called Digital Transformation is Dead. And this person strongly disagrees is what they say. So they say, I disagree. The companies are not investing too much in digitalization. The problem is that they do not invest additional money in non-technical parts of the transformation. So an equally important part of digital transformation is non-technical, but companies think they just have to pay for the technical parts. But if you choose to take the money from the technical pocket and put it into the non-technical, you end up with technical debts and a bad solution. So the point is that a digital transformation is more expensive than companies expect, but if they're not willing to pay for the technical as well as the non-technical things, they shouldn't do it in the first place. Just want to get your take on this.
Yeah, actually, even though they're disagreeing with me, I feel like they're agreeing, or at least I agree with that the comment that person's making, because it's not that organizations are spending too much or are spending too much on transformations. I agree with that they're not spending too much on transformations. I think they're spending too much on technology and not enough on the non-technical stuff. So I do agree with everything this person's saying. One thing that maybe this person and I can agree on too is when you look at a digital transformation, let's just say your scope is this big, you're going to invest in this much technology and this much change, but you risk running, spreading yourself too thin or not doing the change well. Well, what if you scale that back and said, well, we're going to do half that scope on the technical side, and we're going to reinvest and redeploy these resources over here that we would have otherwise spent on more technology? What if we say, instead of more technology, we're going to redeploy those resources and focuses towards the non-technical stuff like change management, process improvement, the architecture, the data migration, the integration between systems, rather than just buying new software. And I think that's maybe where we're actually agreeing more than the person thinks, or because I actually agree with everything the person said. But I think just refocusing where time, money, and resources are spent, I think that's the big difference. And we have to stop thinking about digital transformations as technology initiatives. And I think that's my problem with digital transformation is the word digital leads you to think it's all about technology, buy more technology, buy more capabilities, more this, more that. Well, my view would be, no, actually buy less technology and buy or invest in more process and people aspects and strategy and alignment aspects of your transformation. So I think we're actually on the same page, maybe. But if the person hears this comment and thinks we still disagree, then I'd love to continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is, I think what needs to happen to stop is this AI madness. The clients and the customers should refuse to talk to AI agents, whether they're AI sales agents or AI customer support agents, etc. Humans need to talk to other humans, not to soulless machines. If people do this, then agentic AI will be a big flop. And I really hope it does flop, because the world the technology companies want to build is a total soulless dystopia.
That's dark.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've mentioned it in this podcast before, but one of my I have sort of a two-way tie of favorite book of all time. And one of those favorite books is 1984 by George Orwell. So I love dystopian stuff. Like I'm a super big fan of it. And I love draconian, Big Brother stuff. This stuff has always just appealed to me ever since I was young. But so I appreciate the resistance, the thought that maybe if we resist AI and I think what this person is really saying is we need humans. Like we can't stop being human. We have to keep engaging and interacting as humans. And I totally agree with that. But I think there's something about the inevitability of AI and AI agents and robotics and things like that, that no matter how much a subset of us don't want it, it's probably going to happen anyway. And even if there is a dystopian downfall or downside to it, which there may be, I'm not disagreeing with it. And I'm sure there are going to be some downside effects in terms of society and ethics and legal aspects and all. There's all kinds of implications that we haven't even started to understand yet. But even if that stuff is true and there is going to be a dark side to some of these new technologies, I don't know that we can resist it. And I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we as a society and as a human race have to go through it, whatever it is. And we're going to have to respond to whatever the dark side is. I don't think we can anticipate it enough to say that we want to avoid it altogether. So I think we have to, it's sort of where we're going. And I don't want to sound like we're just going to go like sheep into the darkness of dystopia, but you kind of have to let it ride. And if there is a blowback or a pendulum swing back, which there may be, and I think actually there will be. I think this person is onto something. I think at some point human interaction is going to be more of a commodity, or more of a valued commodity, to where people are going to crave it more because they're tired of AI. They're tired of the inhuman aspects of it. So that's probably, I think everything this person's saying will probably play out that way. Maybe not quite as dark as they might be suggesting, but I think it probably will play out. But we have to go through it and experience it and see what it is, and then respond, because I don't know that any of us can accurately predict how it's really going to look in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely some interesting comments today. But this comment kind of leads us nicely into our first newsworthy topic of the day, which is the 9 CRM trends for 2025. But really comes down to, is AI changing everything for CRM? So in today's topic, we're looking at the 9 trends, and spoiler alert, AI is driving almost every single one of the new trends. The biggest shift, AI is finally moving from this sort of hype that I feel like we were in the past few years, maybe, into real value. So companies are done with proof of concepts and they want the results now. So they want better customer service, higher sales, and smoother operations. But some things that really stood out to me for these trends were agentic AI. I know this is something the comment just talked about, and we've talked about this actually last week as well. And this isn't just chatbots. We're talking about AI agents that can make decisions, trigger workflows, operate independently, and optimize goals for sales or customer satisfaction, things like that. And then AI-driven workforce shifts. So companies are starting to realign their CRM teams. It's less about cutting jobs and more about reshaping roles to work alongside AI. And then lastly, CRM machines. Yes, like machines that analysts are predicting where the future of AI agents are your customers. Actually, think like factory robots reordering their own parts and expecting instant responses. So overall, it's not just like a tech upgrade. It's just they're saying that AI is really full on rethinking how customer relationships work, which is super interesting. But Eric, with agentic AI specifically, it sounds game changing. I know we got into this a bit last week, but how close are we to seeing this at scale for CRM?
I think we're real close. I mean, you look at what Salesforce and ServiceNow and some of these other CRM and customer facing technology companies are doing in terms of agentic AI, in building agents into their products. I think, and also, by the way, adding to the fact that the barrier to entry and the cost of developing these agents is so low, and there's so many different use cases and ways that agentic AI can be used throughout organizations. I just think that we are at that tipping point where, that's going to be, I think, within CRM. I think that's going to be the first area to really get sort of mass adoption of AI agents, and then eventually, I think it will spread to other parts of organizations. Even if you think about like manufacturing or a warehouse or whatever, that I think agentic AI has a lot of opportunity to help organizations at scale. But I think on the CRM side, the reason it's so appealing is because you've got so much interaction and back and forth between organization and customer, and agentic AI is a great way to address that. So I think we're there. I think that, I mean, the vendors are definitely there as far as at least building capabilities that are way ahead of where most organizations are. So I think now it's a matter of adoption. How do organizations begin to adopt this at scale? The technology is there, so how do we use it?
Yeah, for sure. And with all of this realignment, how should companies rethink training roles in customer service and sales?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it brings up a bigger point, which is when you deploy agentic AI or any sort of technology, but especially agentic AI. I think agentic AI, this is even more true than in the past, but any technology is going to change a person's job, and not just the technology they use. It's not just that, oh, now when I come to work, I'm gonna have a different system to use, or I'm going to use agentic AI instead of an old mainframe ERP system. It's not that. That's part of it. That's a small part of it. The bigger part of it is, oh, wow, I'm completely changing my job. My job is totally different than it used to be. Now I'm managing an AI agent, and I'm responding to exceptions, and I might be doing more strategic stuff, and I'm not doing the more mundane work of looking up stuff or trying to find customer information or whatever. Now an AI agent could do that for me. And so what do I do? Like, how do I do that? What does that mean for my job? I've been doing the same thing for 20 years, and now you're giving me an AI agent. So you've got to show me how my job's going to look. So there's an organizational and job design piece of it that comes well before you even get into training and adoption of the AI agent. Now you've got to define what those roles look like, what you expect of them, what their process flows are going to look like. And then you've got to train them on that. So and by the way, none of that stuff really has anything to do with AI agents, although AI agents, of course, influence how the jobs are designed, but it's more about the person and how they do their jobs and training them on that. And then, by the way, here's how the AI agent is going to fit into your world and how you're going to, do your job as a result of that. So that's the way I look at it, as from an org design and a job design perspective being critical, even more critical for AI agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, I mean, you just mentioned, ServiceNow and Salesforce. In your opinion, do you think that Salesforce is technically still like safe at the top, or do you think that it's starting to shift and it's becoming more of an equal playing field?
I think honestly, I think all the incumbent ERP and CRM supply chain vendors, I think they're all at risk because I think AI is going to just totally screw up the equilibrium of power and influence for them. I think what AI is doing is it's putting less focus and less importance on these incumbent sort of call it, standard ERP, CRM systems. Salesforce might have more of an edge. I think that maybe it's a little less disruptive to Salesforce because they already are a pretty, I'd call them a nimble product because you've got not only is it CRM focused, but then you've got this whole third party developer platform with the Force platform where you've got people creating third party products on the Force platform. So you've got all these different options within the Salesforce ecosystem that are already pretty flexible, and now AI is just another way of enabling that. So Salesforce might be a little bit less disruptive, but I think in general, the enterprise tech space is going to be completely thrown off balance here because now you've got all these upstarts and it's a lot easier to develop new products, which we haven't even really talked about in this podcast. You think about how easy it is now. If I want to start an ERP software company now, it's a lot easier now than it was 10 years ago because I could even do it. I'm not a techie. I don't know how to code, but if I can use or get someone to use AI to create a product quickly, at a scale, I mean, what does that mean for competition to the incumbent software vendors? But even setting aside that, I mean, just looking at AI as its own product category, I think that's going to completely disrupt the world. And I know we had recently Jan Bon on this podcast, and he's a big advocate of the whole composable ERP movement, and the fact that traditional ERP vendors are pretty much dying, which is really interesting because he helped pioneer the whole category of ERP software, but now he's the one disrupting it, which I find super fascinating. And by the way, he's a big fan of Clayton Christensen, and Clayton Christensen is, if you don't know, he's an author, and I think he passed away just recently, but he's a very well-known author that wrote Innovator's Dilemma. And he talks about how this whole concept of creative destruction, basically you have to if you create a category and you're successful in it, to be innovative, you have to figure out how to destroy the category you created. And because if you don't do it, someone else will. So you might as well be the one to disrupt it and create something better. And so I think that's what we're seeing in the market right now is composable ERP is sort of in AI in general is sort of disrupting and taking over the enterprise tech space. And I think it will disrupt the incumbents. I think the ones that are most at risk are going to be the big guys, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft. Those three guys, maybe not so much Microsoft just because they've invested so much in AI over the years and they've got the open AI connection and maybe they can adapt a little bit easier. But SAP and Oracle, I think, are going to have a lot of trouble with this whole AI movement, even though they are investing in AI in their core technologies. It's just different. I mean, it's still big, clunky, cumbersome systems that you're trying to plug AI into now, whereas you've got all these startups that can provide potentially more nimble solutions.
Yeah, that's super interesting for sure. I think another part of it, which we'll get into with our next newsworthy topic too, that people are concerned about is obviously the data privacy and the cybersecurity side of what happens with all this change that is going on in the tech world right now. So to get into our next topic, this article breaks down how specifically India's Digital Personal Data Protection Act is shaping the way organizations are thinking about cybersecurity, compliance, and innovation. And while this focus is on India, the implications of it are global, especially as data privacy laws tighten everywhere. So here's what's really stood out to me in the article. Companies aren't just focusing on tech, they're rethinking governance, access control, and even employee training to protect data. The zero trust architecture, this is like an AI-powered threat detection and a multi-layered security strategies that are becoming more the normal and not the exception. And then lastly, data privacy doesn't mean innovation has to slow down. In fact, it suggests that frameworks lead to cleaner, more usable data, which is critical for AI and automation to be effective. But Eric, for you, as data privacy laws like the DPDP Act emerge globally, how should companies balance compliance with the need for innovation?
Yeah, that's always the rub or the challenge or the potential conflict is innovation and regulation, and that's why when you look at the AI movements, there's a lot that's unresolved or unsettled in that front. So, whether it's data privacy like we're talking about here, or whether it's just ownership of data within an AI model, or the ethics behind artificial intelligence, those are all things that you need to have. Their guardrails, if you will, but they could potentially slow down innovation, and that's okay. Sometimes you do need to slow down innovation, especially if there are regulatory or societal considerations that need to be taken into account. So I think it will slow down innovation. I think right now we're in the wild, wild west in a lot of ways as far as some of these AI technologies. But EU and US and other big governments will follow suit, I believe, and they'll probably start to regulate and put more parameters and guardrails in place that will probably slow down innovation to some degree. But the good news is the innovation is happening really, really fast right now, and even if it does slow down, it's probably still going to be a lot faster innovation than any organization can realistically keep up with. So I think it's okay in my opinion. Even if innovation slows down a little bit, I think it's going to be all right.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess a lot of this from this article relies on human behavior as well. So how can companies build a culture where every employee plays a part in data protection?
Well, I think they should do that regardless of regulatory regimes. You should be protecting your data and looking at data privacy for your customers and your employees, and certainly your own internal confidential information as an organization. So I think it's an important thing that you should be looking at no matter what the laws tell you have to do. And especially when you look at AI too, data and data privacy and intellectual property, all that stuff becomes a little bit more tricky because now, when you train an open AI model, for example, what happens to that data and who owns it? And there's intellectual property confidentiality issues. We've had Marcus Harris on the show before a few times now. He's an attorney, a software attorney, and he talks a lot about that too. So if you go to transformationgroundcontrol.com and just search up Marcus Harris and look at the episodes he's been on, and I think the last time he was on, he talked a lot about AI, IP considerations, data privacy, all that stuff, just more from he was looking at more from not what the laws are telling you have to do, but just how you protect yourself as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting. And Marcus did have a lot of great suggestions in that conversation. So definitely check that out. But I'm excited to get into this conversation today with Scott, Aaron, Khalid, and Greg.
Yeah, we're going to get inside the minds of digital transformation consultants, which, hopefully you'll learn a lot, but it could also be kind of scary. You get a bunch of consultants in the same room. It can be a little scary getting inside their heads, but there's going to be 5 of us. So 4 panelists will be joining us here in just a minute. It's going to be Scott, Khalid, Greg, and Aaron from the Third Stage Consulting team, all different positions and roles and areas of focus. We'll introduce them here in just a moment, but we're going to have this panel discussion to talk about just general digital transformation best practices. And we're doing this in the context of a soft launch for our Executive Mastermind series, which we're just launching now. It's a free educational workshop and peer networking opportunity that's a hybrid of online and in person. If you'd like to join in person, you can at certain select times. But it's a small group setting. It's free, but it's limited to a small group of people, and it's going to be amongst the panelists will be the people that are going to be in this interview here in just a few minutes, but we'll have other people from Third Stage as well that'll be guiding us through certain disciplines and areas of focus throughout this mastermind series that'll go from now through the end of the year. So be sure to check it out, and this will be sort of a preview of what to expect from that mastermind, just in terms of the minds that are going to be joining. So we'll bring that panel on here in just a moment, and then later in the show, we'll have Khalid Morris, who, by the way, is also on the panel discussion here in just a moment, but he's going to join again later in the show to talk with me about AI versus ERP and how those two technologies coexist and how they're different and where they should or shouldn't intersect. So we're going to talk about all of that stuff and how AI affects ERP implementation. So be sure to stick around. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Things you wanna feel, I'll give you anything to feel it coming. Do you wake up on your own? I wonder when...
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
And I'll do anything you ever dreamed to be complete. Little pieces of the nothing that fall.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 216. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this digital strategy-focused, tech-agnostic podcast every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also see all the past episodes we've created. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is the company that I work for, and that is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. If you'd like to learn more about how to collaborate with us on this podcast, you can find a link below of who to contact and the contact information to reach out. So be sure to check that out. And I'm excited for our panel discussion here. It's a group of 4 people. They're joining. We're going to start off with 3, and then we'll have a 4th come in a little bit later in the discussion. But joining us here today is going to be Scott, Khalid, Greg, and Aaron from the Third Stage Consulting team. And we wanted to talk about just get everyone's opinions here on digital transformation best practices. What are they seeing in the marketplace in terms of trends? What are some of the recent lessons from some of our clients worldwide? Those are just some of the things we want to discuss here today. And of course, we're going to take audience questions as well. So with all that being said, here's the panel. We're going to bring them back or bring them on stage from backstage here. And we'll start off with you, Khalid. Let's introduce yourself. And thanks for being here today, Khalid.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure as always. I am one of the directors here at Third Stage. I probably am one of the more technical directors in that I kind of come from a more integration background, but I've been with Third Stage for a few years now. And prior to that, I have some Big Four experience and spent a lot of time in integrating applications. And I'm excited to be here. I've kind of been across the digital transformation journey, so I have a lot of broad familiarity in addition to the technical stuff. But I'm excited for the discussion today.
Great, thanks for being here. And Khalid is our AI and data strategy expert. So anything that comes up today related to AI and data, he's probably going to be the first guy that we ask to answer those questions. So that's the other part of your experience that'll be helpful here today. Dr. Scott Janke, thanks for being here today.
Good morning. Hello. Senior Director at Third Stage Consulting. primary focus is on the execution and delivery of projects around enterprise solutions, mostly ERPs, but other enterprise solutions as well. Longtime consultant, operational focused resource. I remember back in my days of getting into computers when I hated computers, around computer cards and 24 and 1200 baud modems and the like. And here we are in the world talking about what Khalid had mentioned, the world of AI and automation and efficiencies through computers. So quite a big journey, but definitely appreciate being on this panel this morning.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And last but not least, Aaron Patterson.
Hey, thanks, Eric. My name's Aaron Patterson. I'm the Executive Vice President for EMEA for Third Stage. I've been with the company since the middle of last year. Actually worked with Eric about 25 years ago at the first consultant organization that I actually worked in the US, a company called Convergent Group. Had a lot of experience kind of helping set up and build consulting and SI and product organizations over the last 20 years, and that's involved helping some of the major utility companies around the world implement some pretty hardcore operational and ERP systems throughout the life cycle of their work. So looking forward to today. Really looking forward to the conversation and covering the topics we've got on the table. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here, all three of you. And this is a great dream team panel discussion, and certainly anything that comes up related to the nuances of international projects in the EMEA region in particular. I will defer to you on that, Aaron. So thanks, all three of you, for being here. I also want to thank the audience, some of the audience who've chimed in on where they're joining from today. We've got someone joining from Illinois today. Thanks for being here. Youssef is joining from Egypt. Thank you for being here today. Got someone joining from Colonia in British Columbia. Someone joining from Ireland. Thanks for being here. And then Natika joining from Charlotte, North Carolina. Those are just a few of the examples of where people are joining from today. So thank you for dropping in the chat where you're joining from today. And then we also just got another one, Emerson from South Africa. Thanks for being here today as well. And I like the picture of the elephant there. Is that an elephant? Yeah, it looks like an elephant on the handle there. So very cool. Reminds me of, speaking of where Aaron and I met, it was in South Africa. So, or we didn't meet there, but we had our first international project together was in South Africa. A big company there that this person, Emerson has probably heard of. So thanks for being here, everyone. I guess just to start, and maybe I'll start with you, Scott, on this question, just real high level, keeping it real, sort of the flyover view, just to get things started. What are some of the, when you look at these digital transformations, ERP projects, and even AI projects now that we're starting to see, what are some of the key success factors that are consistent, regardless of what technology we're talking, or regardless of how technology might evolve? What are some of those key unbreakable, timeless lessons that you've learned as far as what makes these projects successful?
Well, if anybody is familiar with the KISS principle, I won't go into the acronym, but really focusing on what the organization wants to achieve out of the series of projects, and that's probably the first step. Is that we tend to get brought in during an implementation just to learn that the organization tried to put as much change into one project as possible. And part of what we talk about a transformation engagement is a series of projects. It's no longer, I need to do everything in one single project that will take 3.5 years to complete. It's better to take bite-sized opportunities for change and focus on that. But ultimately, what the long-term objective is. But probably the thing that we're learning more and more, especially with some of our SMB clients, is they'll watch some of these videos. They'll do some online research. They'll talk to consultants, and they think it's a one-size-fits-all kind of mentality. An organization that is a young tech company that's growing rapidly is a tremendously different organization than somebody that's been in business for 100 years and they're in manufacturing. So you really have to tailor what your transformation project is going to be to what you're able to achieve. Organizations that are young, dynamic, younger workforce, used to change, can handle a lot of disruption to their business because they're looking for that. But organizations that are long-term stable need to take a little bit smaller bite-sized opportunities for change, measure the results, then do the next engagement. So don't try and cram everything into one project, assuming then you're done for the next 20 years. That should not be the mentality.
Yeah. Not to mention the fact that, if you're planning this to be a big, massive 3, 4, 5 year project, that's sort of a one and done, big bang, sort of a approach, think about how much your business is going to change in those 3, 4, 5 years. So it's sort of like trying to address a moving target, which isn't realistic for a lot of companies.
Agree.
Yeah. How about you, Khalid? What are you seeing as sort of those timeless, ageless lessons from implementations? You've been doing this a long time too. I mean, what are those things that you could have said 10 years ago that still apply here today?
I'm a people, process, technology kind of guy, and
you strike me as that.
Little basics there. And I think what Scott is describing there kind of really touches that process side, the people side. Sorry. But it's important, I think, for people to understand that technology is not a fix, right? It's an enabling function. And so the real question is, like, what are you enabling? Like, how does technology really enable what it is that we're doing? And so it comes right back there. What are we doing? Like what is the strategy for that we're trying to execute? And so I think you kind of want to start there and, really just not think of technology in terms of all its bells and whistles and all of the possibilities and all of the things that you can do, and just get to the basics of what we need to accomplish as an organization, what we're trying to accomplish as an organization, kind of, there, and start working backwards to how does that impact our processes? How does that impact our people? And I think then you can kind of get to a healthy space.
Yeah. Yeah. You could just insert technology name here and everything you just said and everything Scott said as well. It applies. It doesn't matter if it's SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, AI, CRM, ERP, whatever it is, that applies to any sort of tech initiative. Yeah. So how about you, Aaron? And especially from the perspective of, having done so many of these multinational projects in the MIA region, as well as other parts of the world, anything different that you see there, or there's any additional lessons that you've learned over the years?
I think one of the key things when you are dealing with international projects, and Khalid kind of touched on it, is really around the people, right? The cultural differences that you have between organizations in terms of, just the communication, even how people like to be communicated to, how they like to communicate information back, and trying to keep so many people in so many different locations on the same page all the time, right? I think that's probably one of the critical things that impacts that. The other thing that isn't really international specific is really around realistic timeline and budgeting, right? The number of times we go into a client and they have, looked at a business case and said, we have to go live by December of this year, otherwise the business case doesn't work. And they are force fitting a project into a specific schedule because somebody decided a little while ago, and that essentially breaks the project before it even starts, right? I mean, there's so much pressure on the timeline. They maybe aren't really taking into consideration any risk items and any buffer in the schedule. A lot of times we see, which is hilarious given what we've actually seen, is, when budgets come under pressure, the first thing to go is the training or the change management, which is, to us, is, that's way more important, because you can do whatever you want with technology, but if nobody uses the system, you may as well have just gone home and did nothing for the length of the project, right? I mean, it's completely useless. So making sure that you do have a realistic timeline and budget for the project before you get started, or at least have a good indication and have the flexibility to work on that as you're going through the process is pretty key.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great point, because, you talk about how much money companies spend on technology, but they don't invest in the stuff that matters the most. And it's almost like you'd be better off just throttling back significantly what you spend on technology, invest more of it in change management, or at the very least, just don't do as big of a change. Back to your initial point, Scott. I mean, you don't have to do this all at once. There's nothing saying you have to implement an entire ERP system in the next, X number of months or years. So you've got to go at that deliberate pace that's going to be successful and figure out what that right scope is. And maybe it's not quite as big or as expansive as you thought it would be or should be. And it may not be as big and expansive as your software vendor wants it to be. You've got to look at what's right for your business and get that alignment that you guys are talking about. It's a great points. I want to turn back to the audience here real quickly. So we've got someone joining from Nigeria. Thank you for being here today. Someone joining, Prince is joining from Portugal. Thank you for being here today. This is Emerson from South Africa again. Somehow Emerson knows that Cape City is my favorite town. I'm not sure. I'm sure I've said that publicly, but that's very interesting. Good memory because that is my favorite town. I just love South Africa in general. Here's an interesting comment from Luciana. Happy to see the gray hair here. Thanks to discuss live today. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I thought I colored it. No. I'm trying to hide it as much as I can. But I was just telling my wife last night that I think I need to color my hair, but she kind of shot that down and said I should not do that. So thanks for validating that it's okay to have gray hair. Here's from Emerson again. I like bite-sized change management or change implementation, but it goes against the profit-making entities. In South Africa, we have lots of failed ERPs by big retail houses. And I want to hit on something here that Emerson is honing in on that's really important, and that is the vendors make money when you do things that aren't necessarily in your best interest. And so they're going to pressure you and tell you that's the right answer. And in fact, they would probably say it's the exact opposite of what all three of you just said. Some of the lessons are from implementation. So that's the rub. That's the conflict in the industry is what we're saying is something you don't typically hear from software vendors. You typically don't hear from the big consulting firms and system integrators because they make more money when you do things the way that aren't going to benefit you. And it's not necessarily even because they want to screw you or they want to see you fail. I don't think that's where it's coming from. It's coming from a profit motive, but that profit motive is misaligned with what makes these projects successful. So I think that's a really, really good point. So thanks.
Can I add something there, Eric?
Emerson. Yeah, please do.
And I agree with Emerson that when we talk about ERP projects, we're managing a project right now that is probably from end to end going to be at least 4 years in duration. So my earlier comment about trying to keep the individual projects under a transformation in very tight scope and duration does not exclude the fact that in many cases to deploy a new ERP in an organization might take 3+ years. So I don't want to diminish the fact that everything can be done really quickly. But on that front, we have been seeing a change in the marketplace by the ERP vendors of kind of a little bit more of a turnkey, shorter implementation. And I also want to raise caution around that as well. So if after a couple of meetings with a prospect, the software company says, we can get you live with a new ERP in 9 months, be cautious. That might be a great way to start scheduling first, but you have to understand, and going back to the comments of my peers here, every company is different, right? And if a company has never done a major IT project in 20 years, assuming you can do something like that in 9 months is pretty ridiculous. You might be able to try, but understanding that this is going to be a significant change to the organization and taking your time and doing it right. If it turns out to be a year and a half, it's a year and a half. So don't try and shortcut it saying, we're going to take it all out of the box, no process changes, no special configuration or customization. We're just going to load a CD into our server and we're done, right? That mindset of some of the executives who've never done a transformation project before tends to feel like that. Let's just get it done really quickly and then we'll figure things out after go live. That may not necessarily be the best path for your organization. It may be for others. So sometimes you actually have to go longer to do it better and do it right.
Well, I think one kind of a point there is the vendors are thinking about it from the technology side. There are multiple levels to a transformation. and you can just think through it for whatever organization you're a part of. How does it impact it? Like who's impact? There are just so many levels to a significant change, like a software or just any kind of digital transformation, that you kind of need to model it in terms of how it's going to flow through an organization. And if you're dependent on one of those levels, like you bought some ERP system or some financial systems or the likes, they say it's going to take 6 months, 9 months, a year, that you're paying them for. You're contracting them to do one thing for you. But when you think through all of the different facets of how this transformation is going to impact your organization, they're not doing all of that. They're not doing it on the side with your suppliers. They're not doing it on the side with your customers. They're not doing it with your employees. They're just sort of doing the scope, the narrow scope that you outlined in whatever statement of work you signed. And so kind of what the point I think we're really trying to get folks to realize here, and Eric, when you say it's a point that's counter to what a lot of vendors are saying, is I think our point is a little more expansive, and it's more at the heart of what businesses are dealing with respect to a transformation. It's, yes, you do need to think about the people. Yes, you do need to think about the change aspects of this. You need to think about those impacts. You need to think about your processes and not just how they're going to get implemented, but who's all going to be impacted by, and do they understand all the details around all of those different elements. That you can't put that on a software vendor that is coding or programmatically trying to figure out how to build this in a way that you're telling them to design it. And furthermore, you won't even know how to tell them to design it if you don't do a lot of this work up front. So that you really have to respect the process and respect the journey. And sometimes that'll take you to where Scott's telling you. Sometimes that'll take you in small bites. Sometimes that'll phase it out in a long-term stride. And you just kind of have to trust that we'll get through it as an organization if we plan accordingly across all the different ripples that our organization needs.
Yeah, that's a good point. That the technology is always going to change faster than people in the organization can. So it's reasonable to assume that you're probably getting proposals from vendors that are not realistic, not because they can't implement the technology that quickly, but because you can't. And I don't mean that as an indictment or a judgment. I just mean that as the reality of organizations. It takes people in organizations longer to change than technology. It's a lot easier to set up technology because either it works or it doesn't. Either it does what it's supposed to do or it doesn't. It's pretty cut and dry, relatively speaking. But changing people, processes, that piece of it is not so cut and dry. And that's the hard part. And that's the stuff that delays projects and takes longer than what a software vendor might propose to you. I want to get to you on a follow-up question here, Aaron, in just a second. But first, we have a surprise guest. He's actually not a surprise guest. He was invited all along, but he's traveling and is able to join us now. Greg has been waiting backstage to get in the room, and I finally saw him. I think you've been waiting for a few minutes, Greg. So thanks for being here today, Greg. Could you introduce yourself? We were just getting started here on some general implementation lessons, but tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I was just in the green room, and thank you for bringing me in. So Greg Benton,
sure.
I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Third Stage. And like the others on the panel, we've been doing this for a long time. I've got my gray hair to show for it. I love that comment, Eric. I don't think you should color your hair either, by the way. So,
thanks.
So no, this is a super interesting topic today, and just working today on site with the client. I'm really just keyed into some of the technology changes that are happening, especially as it pertains to AI and really the software vendors that we've just been talking about adapting to the new world order with the advent of additional opportunities to automate process, to really involve people in a much shorter timeline to getting live, getting to some quick wins in terms of the business, and moving forward in that way. I think the geopolitical climate as well is lending some impetus to those software vendors to make themselves more accessible and more agreeable to matching up with the individual needs of the organization as they're looking to a software vendor to be a partner for the next 5 to 10 years, right? So this discussion in this panel is a great way to do some research and then take it back and make it your own. So glad to be here today. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. And a follow-up question that I have for you, Aaron. This is from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian asked the question of what's one of the biggest cultural or regional differences you've seen affect a transformation project success in EMEA? Is there anything different you're seeing there than what might apply to the rest of the world?
I think there's a couple of things. One on a very basic practical level, just the time zone differences, right? Especially when you get to the true international and you're dealing with, Asia Pacific and the US or the Americas and then Europe as well and Africa. If you have a truly international organization, then just the difference in communication that is required on those projects, just because nobody is working at the same time. Everybody's on a different kind of time frame and trying to keep everybody aligned and communicated and things moving forward at the appropriate speed. I think from a cultural perspective, one of the things I've definitely came across and done a bit of research on as well is just leadership styles, right? Depending on the countries that you are working in, a lot of times there is an overarching kind of culture of leadership. In some organizations or countries, it's very hierarchical. And so a lot of people won't actually move forward unless their boss gives them the okay. I worked on a project in Brazil, and we had a really hard time getting anybody to sign off on requirements documents because they didn't want to be the person responsible. And so it kept getting pushed up. And the only person who would actually sign was the CIO. And this was of a, multi-thousand person organization. Whereas, if you're trying to get people to follow and lead and do what you need to do on a project, a lot of the Scandinavian countries, they're very much not hierarchical and they want more of a team decision and a team process. And the person who's technically the leader, really part of that team and working together with everybody to bring that forward. And I think, there's mass generalizations that you can make, but what's key is just recognizing the culture of your team, the culture of your team in the different locations, and making the adjustments necessary on the project change management itself rather than even the implementation change management, and the communication methods and styles that you use to be able to bring everybody along in the same way and everybody feel included and part of the solution.
Yeah. And that last part you mentioned becomes even more challenging for these big multinational projects, getting people to feel included, getting them to feel like the change isn't being forced down their throats from the top or from the homeland or the parent company in some other foreign country. It exaggerates any cultural differences and sort of magnifies them when you do that. So you've got to really invest in change management even more so when you're in these multinational environments.
Absolutely.
You have different cultures. Yeah. Great point. Here's a question I've got. I want to point this one at you to start, Greg. This comment is from Ivan on YouTube. And Ivan says, often there isn't enough transparency when choosing a new system. If you haven't got prior knowledge, you are pretty much cooked, as you have to trust the vendor blindly. And I think those last two words, or the last four words, I should say, of that comment are really, really important. Trusting the vendor blindly. I think that's something we see a ton. A lot of our clients do it, and it's understandable why they do it. They do it because they're not experts in technology. They're not experts in transformation. You've got a vendor here that is an expert. They're telling you all the answers and sort of guiding you and directing you. But if you don't know any better, they end up managing you and telling you what you're going to do with your organization. They're going to make money off it regardless of whether or not you're successful, but you're the one that has to live with the results longer term. So how do we deal with that dynamic, Greg? I mean, what are some of the lessons we've seen with our clients as far as how can we not trust the vendors blindly?
Well, I think this speaks to our core value of being independent and agnostic in terms of our approach to choosing the right software vendor and partner, right? Many organizations have got a legacy relationship with a software vendor that maybe dates back 20 years. And they're told by the software vendor that, you've trusted us this long, you need to move to our latest and greatest version. We can help you do that. You don't need to look anywhere else. And as Ivan is saying, you're pretty well cooked if you take that approach, because you're not going to be looking at other things. You're not going to understand what else is available, what might be a better fit, what might be a hybrid solution, correct? In terms of going forward. And so the approach that needs to be taken is don't jump off of a cliff into this with your existing software vendor. Really understand what is in the marketplace, what is available to you as a best fit, and work with someone that can take that independent approach that is not connected to a single software vendor as a practice or as a partner, and have them help you actually get through the process of selecting the right platforms that are going to be your business operations going forward, right? So it's no longer just really a single ERP. Very often it's the entire ecosystem of applications and systems that run together in what we call now the digital enterprise operations. And if you pull that whole portfolio and that whole roadmap together for the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see a very different picture than you will talking to a single software vendor of ERP, right? So
yeah, it makes total sense. And looking at the full picture is sort of a theme that we're hearing here. Is you've got to look at, I think you said it, Khalid, people, process, technology. You've got to look at all three components, not just technology. And we need to rethink how we focus so much of our efforts on just technology without thinking about the people and process piece of it. We're here inside the minds of digital transformation consultants. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, the tech agnostic podcast focused on all things related to digital transformations. We're here with a consulting panel to talk about different things related to digital transformations. Let's jump back into the conversation. Start with you on this question here, Scott. This is from Darian on LinkedIn, and this is a great question, sort of continuing with this theme around how do we reconcile between, what a software vendor might tell you you should do versus what you should do, what's best for your operations. So the question is, how can organizations better identify when a vendor's recommendation is based on profit versus what is actually best for the business? Now, to be fair, sometimes what's profitable for the software vendor is also the right answer for you as an organization. But I would say probably more often than not, I don't have any science or data to back this, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I feel like more often than not, what's in the software vendor's best interest is probably not in your best interest, because your goals are misaligned. You're trying to do two very different things. They're trying to sell software. You're trying to transform your business. Those are two different things. You hope to bring them together, but that's easier said than done. So what are your thoughts here, Scott? How do we reconcile?
Well, I wish I could. I was going to try and get through this this session without bringing up our expert witness practice, but here it goes. So I run the Third Stage Consulting's expert witness practice, in which when implementations or the selection of software goes badly, and the organizations are unwilling to or unable to negotiate something between themselves, they both involve attorneys, and they look for experts like Third Stage Consulting to help guide them through the process. What we typically find in a lot of these expert witness cases is the fact that the organizations do trust the vendors blindly, but also do not go through a formal selection effort. So one of our sweet spots in helping organizations is to guide them through what solutions are best for them, what system integrators are best for them, and going through a very formal rigor around structured demos, RFP requirement analysis. But what usually ends up happening when we get called into an expert witness case is an organization flies to Vegas for XYZ software conference. They love what they see. They meet some sales folks. They shake hands. They have great dinners. And all of a sudden, before they know it, they're signing contracts for a 10-year license agreement with a heavily expensed implementation effort, and then wonder why it went south halfway through. So we want to make sure that organizations like Third Stage, or others, if you so choose to go down that path, you take the time up front to really vet what your requirements are, what your expectations around this project or series of projects, and then talk to multiple software vendors in a very formal way. They're not your friends. They're not that buddies. Once you select the ecosystem, then you can be friendly with them. But up front, you need to think about the organization first. So if our earlier comment, you happen to love this software salesperson, you are love the idea that you're a huge billion-dollar organization, or let's say 500 million, and you're able to do the ERP implementation in 6 months, 9 months, because they want to go as fast as possible, hand over the licensing, and move on to the next client. That is in their best interest. You should drive the organization's needs and requirements for multiple vendors potentially, and make sure that they're addressing your needs in their proposals and not the other way around. And for organizations that are on this call that haven't done a transformation effort in the past, make sure, again, you know what your requirements are up front. Whether you can do that internally, hire a firm like Third Stage, but truly understand what your needs are. Because when a senior salesperson is talking to the CEO or the CIO, and they talk about all their clients that use their system 100% out of the box, be concerned, right? You are going to have some unique processes that are not going to be met by their out of box processes, which is fine. And we see that almost every single time. but you understand what your secret sauce is versus what you can do as far as blocking and tackling from, let's say, a finance or accounting standpoint. So again, knowing what you need up front before you talk to any vendor is going to be crucial to see whether they're leading you or you're leading them.
Yeah, and you want to be confident in that knowledge of what it is you want, because if you don't have that confidence and you haven't taken the time to do what you just said, Scott, then you're gonna inevitably defer to what the software vendor says you should do. And of course, they're going to tell you they've got best practices, they've got pre-configured solutions, all this stuff. Okay, maybe sometimes that applies to you in some parts of your business, but there's going to be other parts of your business where your operations should be driving the technology, not the other way around. And it's also to say, I mean, let me ask you this, Scott. I mean, surely if a software vendor offers me a really nice dinner and I get to meet Bruno Mars backstage at the conference, surely that's worth signing a contract, right? I mean, that's why would I say no to that?
After a couple of drinks, I might say it's worthwhile, but be sure that you are taking your time and enjoy them. Enjoy the stuff that they might throw at you, but know that should not be your deciding factor in signing a contract.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. And I want to actually bring up AI, and I want to start with you on this, Khalid. We're talking a lot about technology initiatives in general, but when we look at AI in particular, how is AI starting to influence digital transformations, and where are you seeing clients on the maturity curve, the interest curve, just their overall adoption of AI? What are your thoughts there as kind of the guy, our main AI and data guy in the company?
Well, the interest curve is through the roof. I mean, everybody is interested for obvious reasons. The one thing I'll say, and when we talk about people, process, and technology, I mentioned that technology is an enabling function, and it is. I don't want to suggest that it isn't. I definitely believe that. But I think what AI is kind of doing, in you asking that question, is it's sort of creating an enhancement component. Technology, for me, has always been that enablement, but now when you see what AI can do, it can really enhance pretty much everything that you're doing. It's not new. It's been around for a while. Some organizations have been able to take advantage of it because they have great programmers or just a ton of resources, like Netflix with product recommendations as an example. It's a function we all know what the Facebooks and some of the social media platforms of the world have been able to do. So companies have been leveraging it, but I guess at least a form of it, I should say. The difference now is so much is at our fingertips, and that's new. And that's different. And that's the change part that can affect small businesses, just like it can affect, municipalities, large organizations. I mean, they all can leverage a lot of the features that AI has now brought to the marketplace in a variety of ways, not just through ERP systems, but through what you can do with your own platforms and your own data and create your own IP in many respects. So I think from that end, that's the difference. And do organizations know how to leverage it? No, they're still trying to figure out what it is. They're still trying to get their mind wrapped around terminology. They're still dealing with, I think, the consumer end of artificial intelligence with some of the popular features that are out there in the marketplace, like some of the AI things that are out there. I love Zapier, by the way. That's a tool that I think you can get a lot of use out of. But tools like that, tools like chat, things that consumers are now dealing with that are like, wow, I didn't know I could do this. So they're still trying to figure that out before they can really dive into, well, organizations have features too. Organizations have can leverage AI in amazing ways, just like people can in their spare time. So I don't think people are taking advantage of. I think they're trying to figure it out. And I think as they come to understand how powerful it can be and how transformative it can be for their organizations, I think it really comes back to exactly what we've been discussing. The change aspects. How does it change our people? How does it change our process? How can we automate things in ways that we never really thought we could before? So it's extremely impactful, and it's just causing a ton of disruption. I think that's the simple way to answer that.
Yeah, well said. And I want to ask you a question here, Aaron, just as a follow up. And when you look at just sort of general trends, whether it's AI or other technological trends, or maybe non-technological trends that we're seeing in digital transformations, when you look to the EMEA region in particular, and even broader, globally, what are some of the major trends you're seeing in the space as far as changes, whether it's technological or not?
I think there's probably a couple of things. One is the actual, the functionality that can be supported as part of the ERP system itself, or as part of the digital transformation. So, you get into robotic process automation or workflow optimization driven by AI. There's a lot of that coming through, I think. But then on the other side, from an organizational point of view, we're also seeing a lot of AI-driven kind of cybersecurity and risk management. There's a lot of work going on there that's able to help that. The other interesting thing that isn't really EMEA, but I've definitely, I think different organizations have different risk cultures and how aggressively they will jump onto new technology and utilize that. So I think it's probably more of a company by company or even industry by industry, rather than region by region type thing. But one of the areas we've seen some interesting developments is just in the way that you can do a lot of AI augmented code development, software development, and how that impacts customers' comfort level and total cost of ownership as it regards customization. Because all of a sudden, with low code or no code tools, do you actually need the SI vendor to come back in and make future changes for your ERP? If you decide, hey, we're going to do some optimization in 3 or 6 months after go live, can you actually do that yourself now using AI tools to help you support that? Now, there's a lot of knowledge and experience needed in terms of deployment, and not just writing code isn't necessarily the answer for everything. But the fact that organizations can make a lot more progress than they used to, even just, knocking up examples of a new UI. It's very easy now to just describe what you want in numerous different technologies, and it'll come up with a user interface, and, sending that off to, instead of bringing in a designer or a UI expert. There's a lot of areas where organizations themselves, without having to use technical expertise from third parties, and how that will change both now and definitely in the next, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, how that will actually change these implementation projects, and the balance, not necessarily the balance of power, but the balance of expertise and what can be done by people who aren't software development experts, and how that will relate to the actual implementation of this technology itself.
Just to piggyback on what Aaron, because I think what he's saying is huge in terms of the impact, and that's kind of what I'm saying, the scope of what AI can do on the organization versus what AI is kind of doing in the consumer spaces. I think the one part that I want to emphasize that Aaron is mentioning is that's platform specific. That gets into, are you AI ready? Is your organization able to even benefit from a lot of those features? And I just kind of want to put that readiness kind of component right there, because what he's describing, I think, is kind of where a lot of things are going, where I think your people need to be able to use some of these things to understand how your platform is, and it needs to be integrated in a way that allows them to use AI to pipe into your platform to be able to do the following functions, lest you get into a data siloed and one group is doing something over here and someone is doing something over there, and these pieces don't connect. And you still want a connected reality as far as your data goes and as far as your organization and processes go. And so that's where I think the readiness component here with what Aaron is saying there is huge. And I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Didn't want to interrupt there, but I felt good.
There's a lot. There's a lot that you've got to have as a prerequisite before you start thinking about AI, and data being one of them. And there's a lot of other maturity sorts of issues and readiness issues that you've got to evaluate as part of any implementation, but certainly as you're looking at AI as a potential area of adoption. The other thing too that you mentioned, Aaron, is that the way AI affects the transformations themselves. You think about all this time and money that's spent on relatively low value activities. I'm not saying coding is low value, but things that could be automated. Coding is one example. Documentation, even just the work we do at Third Stage, we do requirements documentation. We create process flows. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, but it's a lot of manual work.
Yep.
And even we as a company are looking at AI. We're rolling out an AI tool that will likely streamline and reduce the number of hours it takes us to do certain things, which may sound crazy because that means we're going to make less money on paper or in theory. But the reasoning behind it is, first of all, that's just where the world is headed. So we can either ignore it and hope it doesn't happen to us, or we can just embrace it and run with it. But the second part of it is, if you can be focusing your time and money and value on other higher value activities, clients are going to be happier, projects are going to go better. You're going to waste a lot less money. And in our case at Third Stage, if a client spends less money on us doing some of these more manual processes or these manual documentation efforts, then that just is likely to mean they're going to be happier and be more likely to invest in our services somewhere else. So I think that's the way a lot of organizations need to look at AI, is just how is it, what's the short-term potentially negative impact or fear or whatever it is, but what's the longer-term benefit that AI could bring to the table, not just in the implementation itself, but also certainly in terms of how you're using it within your organization.
Yep. And I think the natural language processing and document automation is really, it's one of the easy areas to address, right? I mean, if you think about the number of contracts that companies deal with, the number of invoices, compliance reports, there's a lot of things that can be automated. You can extract key information and really reduce the amount of manual effort there and get some real benefits, freeing up resources to work on the more complicated stuff that maybe you can't do in such an automated fashion.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Here's a comment from Sergi on LinkedIn. Sergi says, at the earliest stage, a customer should set up a wide range search, vendor agnostic, through healthy competition, not to miss strategic opportunities and or new technology advances. And I think that kind of goes back to the point or the thread earlier we were talking about how you can not blindly, how do you make sure you don't blindly follow a vendor? One way to do that is certainly to create competition and look at your options, but also just educating yourself. I mean, that's half the value of going through a software evaluation, is to educate yourself and understand what's out there in the marketplace and how technology is evolving. So that's a really good point, Sergi, that I agree with. What about there's a couple different directions here. Actually, let me pull up another audience question here. This one's from Emerson, or it's a comment, I should say. Emerson on YouTube says, for example, you could have bought licenses for project system, but business custom build project systems. I think the point here being that you have a lot of different options, whether it's off-the-shelf ERP systems or custom dev or best of breed composable ERP. That's something we talk a lot about on this podcast, and we talk a lot about internally at Third Stage, is this whole composable ERP concept. And composable ERP is really just a way to think about it as like Lego blocks of technologies that you can tie together with either AI tools and or just your traditional integration, or you could use a BI or workflow integration tool like a Palantir or Snowflake or a Rapid, one of those tools to pull together some of the different technologies that you have. And I think AI also, is, on one hand, it seems as though, back to your point, Khalid, or back to the whole AI thread here, it seems as though AI on one hand would stimulate organizations to modernize their back office technologies, because if you're in the cloud, for example, that oftentimes will enable AI better than if you're trying to figure that out with your legacy on-prem systems. But on the other hand, AI gives you an option to sort of layer on more modern technology without necessarily having to rip out all your back office systems. Is that something you're seeing, Khalid, or is that is that viable?
No, that's exactly it. I don't even know if we can say modern anymore. I think it's advanced, and I think you can layer really take predictive analytics as a baseline. That used to be an obscure target that people wanted, that people could speak on, but it really wasn't a framed or grounded in, I think, a certain reality. Whereas now, it's just the level of scope. You can have predictive analytics. A lot of ERP systems are rolling out predictive analytic features, but now it's just scope. You can scope that further than what even ERP systems are doing. So it's really a matter of advancement and really having an advanced layer of intelligence. I think what makes AI a little bit different than I think what we understood before is before it was all programmatic, and you really didn't have computers that were learned models where they would be able to adapt and learn what you do and sort of talk to you almost like a bestie, right? It was just basic. It was what I tell it to do, it can do. Or even, if you had some machine learning capabilities, you had this high speed kind of data backend that can do all of these fancy things, but you still had to programmatically do things. I think when you talk about that advanced layer, now you're talking about adding a layer of intelligence on top of your information that you can extract information from, just like you would an executive, just like you would a developer, as Aaron was kind of saying with the coding components, where all of this becomes a partner of sorts, to where you can really have a back and forth with a non-human kind of element that can really give you advanced information around your information and your business model, your competitors, your fill in the blank. So no, it's I don't know if it's even modern anymore. I think it's kind of this really this advanced layer, this partner that you can kind of put on top that I think can be useful in kind of taking you to your strategic goals.
Yeah, well said. Now, Greg, as our chief strategy officer at Third Stage, you see probably more potential clients. You see and speak to more potential clients that are first talking to us about potentially hiring us to help them with their digital transformation.
Sure.
So you're seeing a wide gamut of client situations and starting points and strategies and all that stuff across the world. What are some of the general trends you're seeing with the clients and customers themselves? Anything that we haven't talked about, or anything you would add in terms of what are on their minds? What's on the mind of the average tech buyer and tech implementer?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Eric. And the point at which people are starting to develop this long-term strategy for their organization is changing, right? So it used to be that people would make a technology change for technology's sake and just jump into an ERP selection. What we're seeing more and more often is people starting from the very beginning with the strategy and even the business case internally to understand what can the organization afford, what does the organizational goals mean in terms of the technology that we're going to implement. And that places them somewhere along that continuum from strategy and selection up front all the way through implementation and deployment, that they may have need of a partner to help understand exactly how they can be successful with the entire program. Not getting back to Scott's talk about our expert witness program, but really understanding the pitfalls, no matter where you are in the journey. I think more and more people are understanding that it is a continuum, and where you start really depends upon where you want to end. And some of the things we've been talking about with AI and composable ERP, people are looking for quick wins. They're looking for, time to value being reduced to months instead of years. And that's where I think AI can also help, and also reduce the time for implementation of some of these ideas and some of these technology and people changes that need to happen with organizations. So it is a changing landscape, in other words.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's constantly changing, and just as we think we have it all figured out, something will change to further that.
That's what makes it fun.
I want to exactly. Yeah, it is what makes it fun. Our jobs might be boring if we didn't have that sort of excitement. I want to one more time share the QR code right here for the Executive Mastermind. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, this is a new program we're launching. It's a very exclusive workshop and educational opportunity this conversation here today is much more conversational. We're obviously taking a lot of audience questions. This executive mastermind will be a little bit more structured. We have an agenda of different topics that we'll unpack and sort of present methodologies and frameworks, but we'll also unpack and dive into specific client situations. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're part of a transformation, if you'd like to be part of this executive mastermind, it'll be facilitated by many of us as well as others on the Third Stage consulting team. So there's value in getting direct access to the consulting team that you see here, but also there's a lot of value in that peer networking and peer learning experience. And that's part of what we want here is, sometimes you can hear it from us, but when you talk to another CIO or another project team member that's going through something very similar, there's something therapeutic about that. That seems to be, it sort of calms people down. Like, okay, I'm not crazy. Okay, I'm not alone. Everyone else is going through something similar, and let's commiserate together. Let's learn together. And that's really the whole point and the purpose of this executive mastermind. So it's a hybrid program. It's online. We will do some in-person events in the EMEA region. So London and Dubai in particular are the first two regions where we'll do in-person. We'll also stream it live from those in-person workshops as well. So it's a hybrid event or a hybrid workshop, very exclusive. So if you'd like more about it, apply, scan that QR code, and love to be part of that with you if you're part of a transformation right now. But as people are scanning that code, getting that set up on their computer for future reference or to potentially look into a little bit more, just as a closing question here for you guys, I'm curious to hear, for those organizations that are just getting started on their transformation journeys, or maybe they're early in it, just trying to figure out what to do and how to move forward, what's that one piece of advice you give them? Is sort of like, if there's one thing you're going to do or keep in mind early in the cycle or early in the project, wherever you are right now, this is it. This is the one thing I'd suggest. What would that be for you, Scott? Let's start with you.
I'd probably throw it to Khalid to say data is probably my first position, but I think that what we're seeing on our clients, especially larger organizations, $100 million, $200 million up, there tends to be a little bit of a chasm between senior leadership and the folks who are actually doing the work, whether it's director level, manager level. But I would suggest that organizations spend some time understanding the workload, the drivers, the obstacles that are happening up and down their organization first, and really understand their business. I think a lot of people can talk about their business, but when we bring people into a workshop session, I'm amazed still of how people on the same level are learning new things about what departments are doing, how they're doing it. So just kind of understanding more about your organization. That seems simple and kind of naive, so to speak, but it's important to really understand what is happening on the shop floor, in your sales offices, before you open up the Pandora's box of looking at doing a transformation project.
Great advice. How about you, Khalid? What would that first recommendation be? That first step towards a successful transformation? What would you?
For me, it's strategy. You got to whiteboard this stuff. You got to dream. I would encourage people to go to the whiteboard, create vision and dream for what that organization needs to kind of look like. If you want a dancing panda in the middle of your lobby, like, use cases, model it, right? Like because it can be done, right? And I'm obviously, kind of joking with the panda component, but when you kind of get in your processes and where your organization can go, I think today you have a ton of capabilities at your fingertips. So don't worry about them. Kind of go to the whiteboard and start thinking about, what does this thing need to look like for us to truly have success in kind of this, this year, next year, over the course of the next 5 years or so. And then you can kind of work backwards with technology to support that.
I have to wonder what the world is coming to when the AI and data guy is talking about strategy, dreams, and pandas.
Right?
So I never thought that day would come. But
I want to know what the ROI is on that.
Pandas. Do not sleep on pandas.
Yeah, pandas are underrated for sure. That's great advice. And it joking aside, I mean, it is interesting in all seriousness that you being a data and AI guy, you are still starting with strategy, what do you want, and no matter how technical you are as a person, or no matter how technical you think this transformation is going to be to your organization, you do have to start with that. I mean, no matter what the technology is. So I think that's a really good point. How about you, Aaron? Especially from a multinational, potentially EMEA, looking at the EMEA region in particular, is there anything you'd recommend to that group, or just anyone globally going through a project?
I think definitely the strategy first, but then making sure that there is alignment right the way through the team. So right the way from executive, right the way down, engage the stakeholders early and often. Like I said, earlier on, communication is key here. And if you don't have everybody on board for the project, it's gonna make it a lot harder than it needs to be. So making a concerted effort up front, defining your communication plan. How are you actually going to communicate to the rest of the organization? How are you going to take into account the cultural and time zone differences throughout the org that you're working with, and really make sure that everybody is aligned? I think that gives you the best chance of a solid foundation for project success.
Yeah. Well said. How about you, Greg? Last but not least, what's that one piece of sage advice you'd leave with a company or a team about to go through a transformation, or that's in the midst of a transformation?
I think we've all said the same thing, right? Alignment through the organization, really understanding from strategy all the way through deployment, what your business objectives are, how you're going to return to your stakeholders and your board or your management team, what the return is expected from embarking on this entire journey. And then, just not starting with overinflated expectations. You understand that this is going to be a long-term change. And the way that you get started is really kind of small in aligning the organization to meet up with what your core objectives are for the future, right? So alignment all the way through.
Yeah, well said. And I think that's a good summary. I mean, what you guys are saying here is really interesting, because I didn't hear anyone say, well, you should start with pre-configured best practices, or you should make sure you go with a cloud solution, or make sure you take an AI driven or an AI enabled approach to your transformation. That's what you're going to hear from software vendors, because that's what they're selling you. But take it from these tech agnostic experts here. These are, we're all on the same team. We're all part of the same company. We're all tech agnostic, independent. We're not trying to sell software or anything else for that matter. All we care about is making sure clients do the right things. And it's interesting to hear sort of these knee-jerk reactions that you all have, which is really nothing to do with technology. It's all about internal alignment, change management, process operations, what you want to be when you grow up, dancing pandas. I mean, it's everything but the technology is where you
I'm not going to be able to get that out of my head, by the way, Khalid. Thank you.
I know. I'm going to be thinking about it.
Neither am I. Mental picture.
The one in my
Khalid's
mind
getting
has
there.
it like a tutu. It's like a pink tutu. If that helps, I don't know. Maybe that'll help you women.
No, that's actually making
worse.
it work for me. Yeah. But Khalid's getting inside our heads once again. All right, thanks guys, and thanks to the audience for the great questions. Really enjoyed the conversation, and there's a lot we covered, but a lot we could have continued to talk about there. So thank you for all the great engagement there. So much stuff we covered there that it's going to lead us to more questions and takeaways, and we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. We're also, after a quick break here, we're also going to talk about AI versus ERP, and Khalid, who is just on that panel discussion, is going to join me for that discussion here in the last segment, where we talk about the worlds of AI and ERP and how those two things come together. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say. Tell me, I've been waiting for so long to hear the truth.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 216. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformations. And the show is sponsored by, or produced by, Major Tom Productions. So, Darian, we just had a panel discussion here, which I always love doing. It's a lot of fun. It makes it, quite frankly, it makes it pretty easy for me because they do all the talking. But what were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that discussion here a few minutes ago?
Yeah, I thought it was a great discussion. There's some key points that I feel like each person said that I took away from it, at least. Especially Khalid. First of all, like Khalid being the AI guy or AI expert here. I love how he put how he said it, like you need to go dream first, go to the whiteboard and define what success actually looks like, and then work backwards from there. I really like that point about how you get your strategy first. And that really reminded me about how ERP and AI transformations fail when they fail. If they fail when people just chase, tech trends and aren't thinking about their business. So a question for you, how do you help clients balance vision and execution, like dreaming big, but not drowning in all these fancy buzzwords?
Yeah, well, I think it was also something Khalid said that stuck with me that sort of answers that question, in my opinion, which is if you define, as part of dreaming big, if you define clearly what it is you want to be and sort of operationally and organizationally and strategically, what is it you're trying to do and what do you want to be, that's going to guide a lot of this and help you cut out the noise and cut through the hype in the marketplace. Because certainly the sales messaging and the technologies that you see during your search process could and should influence how you think about redefining your business model, your target operating model, your operations, your organization, all that stuff. It should influence it. But before you start buying and deploying those technologies, you have to figure out in a line as a team on what is it we really want. And it's not just what the future state is too. It's also how quickly do we think we're going to get there, or how quickly are we do we want to get there? What I mean by that is a lot of times organizations are so far behind the technological curve, which is okay. It is what it is. They're still functioning as a business. They're still doing what they're supposed to do. They could be better. Obviously, they're always trying to improve, but that's okay if they're way behind on the technological curve. But it's probably unrealistic to think that company now is just suddenly going to just jump into a fully, AI-driven, cloud-based ERP system or composable ERP system when they're used to using a legacy, homegrown mainframe-based system. I mean, that company that's just too big of a jump for most organizations. So instead of just saying, well, screw it, forget it, we'll just stick with our old system. You don't have to do that either. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you can have that dream big mentality, but then you have to sort of back up and be realistic. Like, well, how quickly can we really get there? Are we all on the same page with that direction and that magnitude of change? If not, is there a more incremental approach that we should be thinking about to mitigate our risk and to sort of walk before we run? So I think Khalid hit both points. He talked about the strategy, dreaming big piece of it. And part of that is defining what you want your future state to be and what you want your target operating model to be. But the whole panel talked a lot about risk and the mistakes that organizations make along the way. You just have to make sure that you're mitigating those risks and defining a plan that makes sense for who you are, and make sure you're all on the same page before you start bringing in technical consultants and software vendors to deploy technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of switch gears to a point that Aaron made, which was a great point about low code AI assisted development and how it's shifting the balance of power. He basically said you might not need your SI to come back every time you want to make a change, but it only works if you're ready. So I wanted to ask, how do you evaluate whether a company is actually AI ready, and what does maturity look like before automation can really take hold?
It's a great question. And that AI maturity and AI readiness piece is a huge part of what we're doing for clients to start their AI journeys. And that's what a lot of our clients want is, where do we begin? What do we have? What don't we have? What would we need to have in place before we even really think about deploying AI, realistically at scale? And so the big things are going to be a couple of things. One is data. I mean, data is such an important part of any digital transformation, but especially something driven by AI, because if you've got bad data, your AI models are just going to be garbage. And so it is truly that garbage in, garbage out mentality that you've got to think through. So looking at data, how can we clean up our data? How can we ensure that we're starting with a data set that makes a lot of sense? But not only that, how do we make sure that we've got the data management, data governance in place longer term to make sure that we don't just clean it up and then put it into an AI model and then it gets screwed up by humans because we don't have the right data governance in place. And so we start corrupting the data, which then corrupts the AI, the learning models and the AI models. So it's not just cleaning up the data. It's not just data cleansing. It's not just data migration. It's also, more importantly, data governance, data management longer term. So you've got to get all that in place first, and then you can start looking at, okay, now how can we use AI? And then you can be more confident in the way you're using AI. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is back to a point we were just talking about a moment ago around where you are today. I mean, you just sort of have to look at how mature are we as an organization technologically, skill set wise, et cetera. And it's okay if looking at AI right now is too big of a jump, and there's a bunch of homework and pre-work you're going to need to do to be able to get ready organizationally and operationally. It might be training people and redesigning their jobs, like we talked about a few minutes ago. That could be one piece of it. It could be back to the data governance piece, establishing that internal data governance and data management process and team. That's something you want to get in place ahead of time. So, and then there's also just the organizational agility of the organization. How quickly can we change as an organization? How can we get people comfortable with change? How can we start to prep them for the massive changes that AI will inevitably introduce to our organization? Those are all really important prerequisites. And then, of course, back to what Khalid said before in the conversation, defining that future state, vision of what it is we want to be. What is that strategy? What are our dreams, as he said it? What's the dancing panda? What's the dancing panda of what we want our organization to look like? And then that, once we have alignment around that, now we can figure out how AI is going to help us do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great conversation overall, though. I just have one final question for companies that maybe are just getting started in a digital transformation. What is one thing they should absolutely do before they touch a single piece of technology?
Ooh, good question. If I had to pick one, I'd say just define what they want to be when they grow up, strategically, operationally, and get on the same page. Because it's easy to say, well, we want to be a modern, technology driven organization. Okay, well, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? And what do you want those processes to look like? And that definition and alignment sounds really simple to a lot of people, but it is so difficult. And it, I don't want to say it's difficult. It's just time consuming, and it's kind of messy, because now you're talking about different opinions, different silos within the organization. You've got your internal politics, your internal cultural strengths and weaknesses, all this stuff coalesces together now, and you've got to get clarity on what is it we're really doing here. What do we want to be when we grow up? Once you've got that, everything else isn't easy, but it sort of falls into place a little bit easier once you've got that. And companies too often just don't take that time up front to do that. And so I'd say do that. And sort of part B of that, which is embedded in this, is slow down. Slow down early on, because that's going to speed things up later on. If you just speed right into the project, you're going to hit so many road bumps and pitfalls, and you're going to get organizational resistance. You're going to waste a lot of money and time on things you shouldn't be focused on. You're going to create a lot of chaos within the organization. So you got to slow down to really speed things up later on. And by slowing down, ironically, by slowing down early in the project, you're going to implement a lot faster and a lot cheaper than most organizations that skip that early planning phase.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm excited to get into this next section and learn more from Khalid here in a second.
Yeah, this is going to be cool. We actually recently launched a video on my YouTube channel with Khalid and I talking about AI in ERP. And what I like about it is that we're talking about such technological, advanced technology type stuff. But in the video that you'll see here in a second, we're actually like walking through a park with a lake, and it's just like the serene sort of environment outside of our office. But yeah, we're talking about like some deep technological stuff. So it's kind of an interesting contrast, very informal. It's not kind of your traditional video where we're sitting in an office boardroom or in an office talking about the stuff. We're outside walking around in nature talking about AI and ERP. It's actually it was a really fun video to make, and we want to play it for you here on this podcast because it is so informative. He has such good points around how we think about not just AI, but how do we think about ERP and other enterprise technologies, and how do those two things come together, and how should AI be separate from ERP, or should it be separate? When does it make sense to integrate the two? When doesn't it make sense? Just sort of thinking through all this stuff that you've got to ask yourself when you're going through these sorts of projects. Generally speaking, it was one single shot. I mean, we didn't take anything out. We didn't have to do multiple takes or anything. If you watch my videos, I screw up all the time, and she has to keep reshooting the same thing because I screw it up so much. But in this conversation, Khalid and I were just walking and talking. It was very informal, but it was like one shot and we were done. So it was pretty fun to do, but it was super informative. I think it's about a 15 or 17 minute clip. We're going to play this here, and it's all about the intersection of AI and ERP and how we should be thinking about those two technologies together, and in some cases thinking of them separately. So let's roll the clip, and we'll come back and talk about it here in just a second. Khalid, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's good to be here.
So when we're going through helping clients with their AI strategy, one of the big things that comes up in these conversations is we've got an ERP system, or we're rolling out a new ERP system, but we also want to leverage AI. So how do you recommend that clients navigate that decision of, do we use the AI tool that's in our ERP package or some other enterprise technology, or do we find a standalone AI solution?
Well, both are great options. So it really comes down to what is your strategy, right? So depending on your strategy, there's some great functions and features in a given ERP system that make a ton of sense. So, maybe it does work for you to use the AI features in an ERP system, or for other companies, it might be they have maybe complex data models or big goals with what they need to do strategically. A standalone system might make sense because you're not going to get all that functionality out of an ERP system. So it really comes back to strategy, like really, really understanding that. And so once you do, then I think you can answer that question confidently, easily. I love the idea of standalones because, something on the standalone side really bubbles up what the core competencies of the business is and how they can kind of maximize their business objectives. So I would always encourage organizations to think about, what can we do? How do we own our AI? How do we incorporate AI into our business model? But you don't necessarily have to. I mean, it's always about value. So if you have value there through your ERP system, use that.
Yeah. So we talked about this in a podcast that you joined me for, where we talked about this exact topic in a lot more detail on the Transformation Ground Control podcast. And one of the things we talked about was that sort of trade-off between, your ERP vendor, like your SAPs, your Microsofts, your Oracle, NetSuites. They all are investing heavily in AI, and they have a lot of different customers using AI. Yeah. So it can train the AI model potentially better than you might be able to with your own AI tool. But on the flip side, you're sort of giving up any sort of competitive advantage that you might want to get out of AI potentially. Is that part of what you see there too that you've got to navigate?
Well, I think the misnomer is, yeah, you're training the AI, but what are you training it to do, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's always good to train the AI on my data and based on parameters that I define and create.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to kind of create this broader space of, oh, use everyone's and I mean, that could create biases in the AI that, you know, you really don't want as a part of yours. So it always comes back to your strategic goals and objectives and what makes the most sense. Whether you're living in a big data world or not, I think that, you know, you really want to set the baselines and parameters, and that only comes when you're having those independent internal discussions and you have a clear vision for what you want to get out of your strategic window as an organization.
Yeah, just like any technology.
Just like any technology, right? I think the rules for AI is just like the rules. If you replaced AI with ERP, I think we would be having the same stylistic, you know, from a consulting perspective, from a whiteboard perspective, we'd be having the same conversations of this is what makes sense for the organization. This is how you go about doing it. It's just AI. There's so many opportunities there, and there's so many different approaches that sometimes they get sidetracked in terms of what the step-by-steps. It's the same steps almost, right? You in order to get the kind of outcome that you're looking for. But you kind of just have to do the work. You know, you just do the basic small work to kind of get to that end goal of now I have a clarity around what I need my AI to look like for my organization. And that to me should be your goal, right? Whether it's ERP or whether it's standalone, you have that clarity.
Yeah. So regardless of whether your AI sits in your ERP or other type of enterprise technology, or whether it's a standalone, either way, you've got to focus on data, which you mentioned. You've got to have good data, which you could argue this has always been an issue. Organizations always struggle with getting their data clean, keeping it clean, and then ultimately using that data to get accurate reports, or in this case, train your AI models to be more effective. So how do organizations, how should they be treating data? I mean, what should they be thinking about when they think about data in the context of AI?
I would think about my steps would be get my data square. If I was thinking about AI, data, machine learning, AI, in that order, you know, because really the AI part of it is really leveraging what machine learning in general, and that is sitting right on top of your data. So no matter how you slice it, that's kind of those stepping stones. And so you kind of have to have your data in place. It has to be organized. You need to understand where it is, and then how the algorithm that's sort of getting built there, how that sits on top of your overall data structure. Whether it's one or if it's multiple, it's the same rule. Whether it's internal or external, if you're bringing in kind of web data or some kind of external source there, it's still the same. You kind of need to identify them, understand what they are. And that's to me where you kind of get where you were kind of talking about earlier with the biases and the different parts there. Like once you understand what they are, you can kind of put some controls in place to kind of insulate that from any kind of negative impacts to what the result is. Because the last thing you want to do is build an AI a model that gives you some information, be it predictive or not, and you're trusting it, and it's based on faulty assumptions, right? Like that's something that, you know, you want to guard against, and I think that's a part of the maintenance strategy for really building out something on the AI side.
Yeah, it's a lot like 20 years ago when companies were implementing a basic ERP system. They had the same problem. You know, the data sucks, your reports suck, and then suddenly people don't trust the technology, and they start questioning.
Then they stop using it. Then it turns into all the same familiar problems that you know of on the ERP.
Right. Manual workarounds.
Right. You're showing me these great ERP tools, but nobody trusts the data because it's not accurate.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't want that from an AI model, you know, where you're relying on it for predictive information, because trend-wise, that's probably where it goes. Even for ERP information, it's probably going towards a more generative AI space where you can kind of text in and say, oh, give me this or give me that, and then have a predictive analytical sort of result, answer, or whatever it is. That's kind of where things are kind of going, but you have to believe that.
Yeah.
So the trust part of that is where you'll want controls in place. You'll want to make sure you have safeguards for where this information is being pulled. Understand all the assumptions that go into that, so that you can sort of use that information confidently.
Right. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now, what about the impact to organizations, people's jobs? You know, the AI, I mean, first of all, technology in general is going to impact people's jobs no matter what, but AI is sort of a whole nother level of impact and automation and doing a lot of the work that a lot of people take pride in, you know, whether it's collecting information or analyzing information or whatever. What have you seen work in terms of change management as it relates to AI?
Change management is, that's the handshake. I think that through all of these dynamic shifts, it's important to really help your organization through all these changes. I mean, you are one of the pioneers around this message and this effort here over the last few years. It's just critical, and I think a lot of organizations forget about it. They act like it doesn't exist. But whether we're talking AI or we're talking ERP, when your organization is going through shifts like this, you want to get in front of them rather than being behind them, because they'll start, what I call these water cooler conversations, and they'll start making assumptions that you don't want to happen. So yeah, I don't think technology doesn't always take your jobs away. It can, but it doesn't always take your jobs away. That doesn't necessarily have to be the strategy. And it's certainly not necessarily the smart approach. It may change your jobs. It may require reskilling. I think that AI actually makes you more productive. So how do we leverage that? How do we get to a space where we're using AI to get better at our jobs rather than using AI to sort of cancel jobs, right? Because you think about the curve there. If we're becoming more productive and we have resource, now we can do more. Versus, we're going to make it real efficient to where we don't need your job anymore because AI can do the things that you can do. It's still a bit reductive. So you kind of have to ask yourself, what's the ceiling?
Yeah.
And is my ceiling expanded with this individual or not? And I honestly believe that when you start to do the work, what you'll find is that AI can enhance your organization to multiple times over with the individuals you have. If they're properly reskilled, if they understand how to use it, if there's sort of a natural space, and you can really make the argument, unless you're dealing with robotics, you're still going to need people to be able to operate and analyze the information that AI is coming up with. So it's a hand-to-hand relationship, and I think OCM is in the middle of it.
Yeah, we can't just let AI run wild and expect that it's just going to do all the humans' jobs without any sort of human oversight or collaboration or intervention or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and remember, you have the biases in place.
Yeah.
So there's a maintenance factor to AI regardless. And so if you just have AI running wild, like you're kind of talking about, well, are the biases there? Like, what happens when they're wrong? Who's going to correct it and kind of get it on the right track? I mean, you can even see some of that with something like a ChatGPT. I mean, it can get overrun in a hurry.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to restart, reshuffle, kind of get back to a point where you're really getting quality information again. Because it certainly can produce that, but it can also throw you off. It can give you wrong results. And if you don't have someone there that can interpret that and understand that, then yeah, you can get in trouble real quick.
So you recently wrote and published a book about AI. What's the name of the book?
Future-proofing your business with AI.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll include a QR code at the bottom of the screen here. We'll include links in the description field to where people can go buy that. But when you were writing this book, I imagine as you were writing that book, doing the research and just thinking through it, you had some ahas or some big takeaways. What were some of the big takeaways you had from writing that book?
Well, my background. My background is data, it's integration, application integration, data integration work. That was a big aha though, because as I got deeper into how the AI parts of this work and how this is going to integrate with the consulting work, the kind of work that we do, data as a strategic asset is really what jumped out at me. Because I just kept coming back to how valuable a company's data is.
Yeah.
Like from an AI perspective, AI pulling in data from all these different places and getting into some of the legal frameworks around the controls that aren't in place that should be in place, the the craziness and chaos that AI is sort of kind of creating, it really just brought me back to just how valuable data is for an organization and how we don't really take it as seriously as we should. So that was my first aha, was data as a strategic asset.
And by the way, as it relates to that, that kind of brings us back to that first question around data and where you want the data to be. Do you want it to be in your own AI model, or do you want the software vendors to have that?
Yeah, it's a control thing. It's a big control thing. Like, who's controlling it? You think about even something like Facebook. I mean, their business model took off in the markets when they decided to sell data. They said, "Oh, well, I mean, we have great technology and we have all these users, but what's really valuable to organizations is we have all this information on people." And then all of a sudden, the value of the company skyrocketed and kind of turned into kind of what we know of it today. But the data parts, what an organization owns from a data end, it's just big. It's just big. They have a lot of, they know their customers. They know their behaviors. They know sometimes even personal information of even employees themselves. So it's important for companies to get serious about how they lock down and control their data. And because people are selling that information, people are trying to get access to that information. And I think too many companies are on defense about data when they should be on offense. They should be able to put value points on it. If you ask an organization now, can you value my data? They probably look at you funny, like, why would I do that? Yeah. And when we just gave the Facebook example, well, your data could be worth millions. Yeah. Do you understand how to use and leverage the data that you have in your organization? And I think that AI presents an interesting opportunity for us to kind of take that internal view of what does my data mean to me as an organization. It means everything, right? You take your data away, your company falls apart. But what does it really mean? And how are we using it? How are we leveraging it? And how are we protecting it?
Yeah. So other than data, or in addition to data, what other takeaways did you have from writing the book?
Just the just how powerful AI is, and given how powerful AI is, given how important your data is, it just begs the question, and that's standalone versus ERP. I think everyone should really think hard about a standalone component to their organization. Yeah. Maybe it's small, it doesn't have to be huge. But like, what does my AI look like? Just from an IP perspective. You own your brand. Do you own your AI? And being able to kind of say, AI is so important to my future that as my organization, I have ownership of what we do from an AI perspective. I think that's a worthy question, right? Like, first, we just talked about standalone versus ERP AI. And for a lot of organizations, it makes a ton of sense to just use the ERP, right? I'm not suggesting that ERP AI is bad, it's not. But just philosophically, when you think about how critical your data is, when you think about how AI is changing the business landscape, don't you want to control how this affects your organization? I mean, it's just naturally, yeah, of course I do. So that's the thing that just jumped out to me, that, I just think organizations are really going to try to get in front of their AI, and it makes sense. Right. It just makes sense strategically.
Right. So that was the clip of Khalid Morris, our director of AI and strategy, or AI and data strategy, I should say. And that was a video we recently launched that's been very popular on my YouTube channel so far. But what were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation, Darian?
Yeah, I found it really interesting, especially how, you and Khalid broke down the decision between using embedded AI features in ERP systems versus going with like a standalone AI solution. I think that's like a dilemma a lot of organizations will probably face within the next few years here, especially if they're going to add AI to their company. But one thing that you guys mentioned was that choosing between, ERP integrated AI and standalone AI tools depends on strategy. And how would you say that a company should go about in making that call, especially if they don't have a clear AI roadmap yet?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think first of all, getting back to the theme or a thread that Khalid talked about earlier in the panel discussion with the other consultants, is that, defining what you're trying to accomplish first will then lead to which technology can best help you get there. So if you have that better vision of what it is you're trying to be, that's going to help you in your evaluation process. And if you've got prioritization of those requirements and needs and wants of technology, then that's going to help you determine what the best path is from an AI and overall technology perspective. So that'd be the first thing I suggest, is just figure out what it is you're trying to do strategically and operationally and organizationally. Then that'll lead you to a better answer to that question.
For sure. And then I guess the next part of it is it comes down to, companies then should ask, do we own the AI if we implement it? And what does that actually mean for a company to, I guess, own its AI? And why is that so important right now?
Yeah. Oh man, that's something that's been top of mind for me a lot lately. I've been thinking a lot about that, actually. It's like, even for us as a company at Third Stage, for example, we're looking at AI tools to help us do our jobs better. And I've struggled with, do we need to own the AI? Could we license it from someone else? Or is it more important for us to own the data to where the data isn't training other consulting firms, other consulting firms that might use this AI tool that we're using? How do we ensure that all of our client data doesn't get commingled with other consulting firm client data? And that to me was the more important differentiation, is making sure that we own the client data. And actually the clients own the data, but no one else can use the client data in their AI models except for us. And so that was a big thing, because part of it is, not only do we want to protect client information, but we also want to have the advantage of having such scale with the number of clients we've had over the years, especially when you look at some of our smaller competitors. I mean, they don't have the robust and breadth of clients that we have. So we wanted to make sure we preserve that, and that other, mom and pop consulting firms that use this AI tool didn't have the same advantage that we did. So I think data is probably the bigger competitive advantage than AI itself, because AI is becoming so ubiquitous right now that so many companies are using it. I don't know that it's eventually going to be commoditized to some degree, where everyone's using AI for different things. So I don't know that the AI itself is going to be the advantage. I think it's the data and the use of AI and the adoption of AI, that's going to be the real competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question. You guys talked about, change management in AI. What are some of the best practices you've seen for helping employees adopt AI without the fear of job loss?
Clarity, first and foremost, providing clarity and definition of what a job is going to look like. Because I think companies don't understand enough about how AI or technology in general is going to impact their people. And by not understanding that themselves, they can't communicate well with the people on how technology is going to impact them. And because you're not communicating well to the people, then the people start to resist the change or get worried about it. They start to freak out, all that stuff. So it's unintentional in most cases, but it cascades down the organization. That lack of clarity, that lack of understanding and awareness cascades down to the organization. And then organizations wonder, why is everyone pushing back on this really cool tool that has so much power and opportunity for our organization, which it probably does. But it's understandable why people are pushing back and freaking out. It's because the organization didn't have that clarity and that focus up front to define how people's jobs are going to change. So instead, what they do is they typically will say, well, we're going to deploy AI and it's going to make us a lot more efficient. And if you tell me that, I don't know about you, Darian, but if someone tells me I'm going to give you this tool to make you more efficient, I think, okay, you expect me to do all my work in less time. So what are you going to do with the rest of my time? Are you going to cut back my hours? Are you going to eventually replace me? Or, am I going to sit around and twiddle my thumbs, with the time you've automated of my job? I mean, either way, that none of those are good options that I'm going to be comfortable with long term, unless you give me a vision and paint a picture for me of what that looks like. And it might be that, yes, we are going to automate that 30% of your job where you're out gathering information and consolidating information, because now an AI model is going to do that for you. Okay, that's great. But what do I do with the rest of my time? And a lot of times organizations would just say, well, you get to be more strategic. You don't have to do as much manual work. Okay, but what am I going to do? And my job is to do something. If I don't have anything to do, I get worried, because then I wonder, am I valued, or is my job going to go away? Whatever. So you've got to lay that out for people. And the irony of it all is, usually technology, at least with most of the clients we work with, technology typically is not a headcount reduction play. Usually it's, yeah, we want to make people more efficient, but we want to grow without having to hire, as many people as we might have in the past. And that's fair enough, right? But you've got to give people that comfort and understanding of how they're going to be important and how they're going to fit into the organization long term, even with the introduction of new technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting. And you make some great points there. But yeah, all such great conversations today.
Yeah, good stuff. A lot of AI stuff. And well, I'm sure this will not be the last time we talk about AI. We might as well just change the name of the podcast to AI Ground Control or something. But we'll keep it at transformationgroundcontrol.com. But speaking of the podcast, you can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see any of the past episodes you might have missed, all the AI topics and non-AI technological topics as well. We've got a lot of great guests coming up here in the next few weeks. We'll talk about some supply chain stuff here in coming weeks. We've got someone from Rootstock, which is a manufacturing ERP system. He's going to be on the show here soon. We've got another AI expert out of Europe that's going to join us here in a couple weeks. So actually next week will be our AI or another AI expert in the field that'll be joining us. So a lot of good stuff, a lot of good guests coming up. Be sure to check us out every Wednesday. You can find new episodes. Show is produced by Major Tom Productions, sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. If you'd like to learn more about Third Stage or just brainstorm ideas, use me as a sounding board, feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. So hope you all have a great day. We'll see you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Have a great week in the meantime, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Major Tom.